Hi everyone, and welcome to Life Made Simple. What are we working on today? We got a 2007 Honda Pilot, and we're going to be replacing the front sway bar end link, which is this guy here. And why are we replacing it? Well, did our usual inspection. See down here, the bottom part of that sway bar end link shouldn't be doing that. So we got a replacement part. We're going to pull that out and we're going to replace that today. And usually what goes wrong is these things get so old and rusted and corroded in there, we tend to have a hard time getting those out. We're going to start by penetrant spray and we will hope for the best. Okay, where possible, I like to try to clean this stuff off a little bit. Try to get some corrosion off. Try to get it so whether you're using your hex or your sockets, you're trying to get as good a grip as you can on this stuff. Try to prevent stripping it. It may be inevitable looking at this thing, but we're going to try to do our best. So usually you clean it out a bit, some penetrant on it, go from there. In typical Honda fashion, pretty much everything seems to be 17 millimeter. So I'm pretty sure that's going to be the right fit. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to impact it a little bit, see if we can loosen it up, and then switch to holding on to it with an Allen key and trying to continue to remove that. And my first attempt to break it free with a Allen key and a ratcheting wrench is a failure. And so the journey to remove the rusted bolts begins. So now we're on day 2. So yesterday I wasn't able to get this free. I closed up the garage, did what I have to do for the evening, finished work today, and now we're back at it. So you can see we ran into a bit of an issue yesterday because this up here, completely rusted out, corroded, isn't coming apart. And then down here as well. And in fact, this is where the actual issue is with this. So if you give it a pull, you can see this is completely off of there. And so same thing, trying to get that piece out, get the piece up top out as well, so we can take the whole sway bar end link off and replace it with a new one. Here I'm using Milwaukee locking pliers to try to hold on to that bolt while I break it free with a wrench and wrench extender. I really like these Milwaukee locking pliers. They have this added feature at the end here where instead of the normal ones where you have to turn it by your hand or fingers, this one you can stick a screwdriver into and tighten it down even more and more, so it's getting a really, really good grip on that bolt. Putting a wrench extender on this didn't work at first, so I'm going to switch over to trying to hammer that wrench to break this nut free. As I use some more hammering, you see the wrench start to move. But the question is the wrench actually secured to the nut and loosening the nut, or is the nut welded onto the bolt from the rusting corrosion and it's all still moving as one unit? It's kind of hard to tell when I'm hitting the wrench, so what I do here is I basically mark the bolt. So after I hit it and the wrench moves, I can see if that yellow mark on it moved And if it didn't, that means the nut moved independent of the bolt, which is what I want. But if the yellow line moved, that means the nut and the bolt are all moving as one unit, and I'm not making any progress. Having a look, it turns out I am not making any progress, and so as a result of that, I am going to decide to cut the bolt off instead. Using the Milwaukee rotary tool here with the cutting wheel. The only issue with this is I don't have a professional die grinder, I don't have an air compressor, and so this cutting wheel is kind of small. If I was at the shop and I was using a die grinder with a large cutting wheel, it would burn right through this and take a fraction of the time. But because I'm working with the tools that I've got access to, this rotary tool is slowly cutting through the bolt on the other side, and then after a little while, I'm going to turn that nut and bolt to try to get access to underneath and to the opposite side, which I wasn't cutting. And that way I'm kind of rotating it through and I continue to cut. So I'm hopefully cutting through as much as I possibly can, and then maybe I can snap it off, or maybe I can hammer it off. But the next little while here is a whole bunch of cutting. And at this point, I'm just going to hammer it a bit so I can see if I can bust that sway bar end link off of that bolt, and then I have access to the back of it. So I continue to cut away at this, and I'm doing it in like fast forward, so you don't have to sit and watch me do this for like 40 minutes, but there's a lot of cutting going on. As I get to the end of this, I realize that this is not going to cut all the way through, and so I decided to switch over to my reciprocating saw. I put a metal cutting blade on there, and continue my hacking away at that bolt until someday it comes off. Again, I'm doing this stuff in fast forward for you, but let me tell you, the cutting goes on for a long, long time. Well, at this point, I've cut through most of that bolt in the back there, so I'm going to take a hammer and see if I can hammer it off. By the way, you'll notice I'm wearing safety glasses, breathing apparatus, and hearing protection, because a lot of this bolt is coming off, all the metal shards are coming off, and it really sucks to get that in your eyes, breathe it in, or in your ears. Okay, so this is what it looks like back there. You can see that I sawed through the bolt, but there's that little, it's not quite a washer, but it basically flares out. It's a bit of a flange. It's like a washer, and so I can't push the bolt through yet. So I'm chiseling it so I can get that to come up, and then the hope is to hammer it through. The chiseling goes on for quite a while as well, and it's not making a ton of progress. So I decided I'm going to use my rotary tool with a grinding bit, and I'm going to grind down that part of the bolt to the point where I can yank this bolt and nut out. So like I said, I'm using a grinding bit, and it's grinding the back of that bolt. And at the same time, I'm spinning the nut and washer so I can grind different parts of the back of that bolt that's still sticking out. Just come out strong as that. Well, there it is. Finally got one of them out. Basically, tried the rust penetrant, tried the hex, tried locking pliers. None of that was going to work. So I hacked the bolt off. But then there was a piece sticking out, as you can see here. And so I couldn't hammer it quite through yet. So I basically grinded and grinded and grinded until it was enough, grabbed the pliers, and then pulled it out. So that's what happens with front end sway bar links. So that one's open and that one's free now. I got to get that bottom one out and then we can install the new one. But yeah, that's kind of how life works. This thing has 300,000 kilometers on it. It's 15 years old. It's rusted, it's corroded, and it takes forever. Then basically you get it out one at a time. So that's going to come down. So
you can see here, I basically have the locking pliers on there. I'm using the control arm as leverage, and then I've got a breaker bar with a socket on the other side, and I'm trying to crack that nut free. With the sound that it makes, that's the sound of rust breaking free. The problem here is that that sway bar obviously moves, and so now I'm going to use a ratcheting tie strap, and I'm going to tighten it down so that that sway bar is connected to the control arm, and hopefully I'll get some added leverage here when I'm trying to break that free. The issue I'm running into is that the locking pliers against that angled control arm aren't really giving me the leverage. It just kind of keeps slipping, so as I pull, and it's super tight because of the rust and corrosion, the locking pliers are sliding downwards and losing their grip because the control arm is not flat or perpendicular.
okay, well, it's not going so well. As luck would have it, this steering knuckle is in the way, so I can't get the rotary tool to be flush there, and I don't really want to cut it at an angle. So I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to break that free.
What I'm doing here is I'm tightening those locking pliers onto that bolt. I've got a hex on the other side connected to a breaker bar. I've got my wrench with a wrench extender on the nut. And I've got this pry bar wedged between the lower control arm and some blocks of wood and a plastic crate. And I'm just trying to get that pry bar to be perpendicular to those locking pliers. So when I'm pulling up on that nut on the other side, and these pliers are coming down, that it's coming down against the pry bar and giving me the leverage that I need, the stop or the blockage that I need, so that it gives me resistance. So as I'm pulling up on that nut, it's giving me a chance to break it free. That sound you just heard is a sound of progress. It's basically the rust and the corrosion that's breaking free inside the nut and the bolt. So every time you hear that, I'm making progress.
No, I haven't used a full bottle of penetrant spray on this, but I've been spraying it very liberally through this entire process. That might be a good sound, generally speaking.
A couple of quick tips if you're ending up doing a similar practice. One, when you pull up on a pry bar in this situation, you actually don't want to pull too slowly. You want to kind of reef on it quickly, and it gives a chance to break that rust and corrosion free versus slowly pulling up on it. And then as you do that too, on occasion, these locking pliers may give a little bit. So I periodically tighten up those locking pliers to make sure I'm getting a firm grip on that bolt, and then continue on the nut on the other side. As I mentioned here, I'm just resetting those locking pliers. So I'm disconnecting them and then clamping them back on, tightening them back down to make sure I get a really good connection and a good grip with that bolt as I continue to work on that nut. These Milwaukee locking pliers are awesome, by the way. I really, really like this design, and they've been very durable so far. So watch here, this is what I meant by jerking or pulling up quickly on that breaker bar or wrench extender with a wrench. You're kind of jerking it upwards so you can get it to move quickly and hopefully break that rust free instead of slowly pulling at it. Alright, I'm definitely making progress here. So at this point, I'm basically taking that wrench and wrench extender off, continue to spray it, but I'm going to switch to my 3/8 long handle ratchet with a 17mm socket at the end of it, and I'm just going to keep ratcheting this until it's off.
Coming free. Slowly but surely. Oh.
Guess I'm getting in my rowing today. I don't think there's an Olympic sport for hunched over rowing, pulling up a ratchet, but if there was, I'm doing my best to get in my reps.
Alright. Done. Well, done taking it apart anyway. Old part. This one came out with a lot of elbow grease and penetrant fluid. This one we cut off. And then the new part. Notice it's pretty stiff in there. And comes with the nuts, so you don't need to reuse old anything. And just to confirm, let's see if this is the right one. Yep, it is. It'll be 6mm. So that's the hex that we're going to need. So we got to hold that in place. Once we put the bolt through the strut as well as the sway bar, then we basically got to hold it in place while we get a ratcheting wrench on it and tighten it up. And I will look for the torque spec. Torque spec is sort of it's a bit dynamic, if you will, because you're not really getting a hex to hold it in place while you get a socket for a torque wrench. So really what I'm going to be doing is using a ratcheting wrench to tighten this up, and by feel I'm going to get it as close to whatever it might be. I'm guessing it's probably like 45 foot-pounds. There, just to get it on there. Start it all by hand, of course. And actually these nuts are self-locking nuts, so as you tighten them down, they're gonna feel pretty tight. So you start them by hand, and right basically at that point you're gonna feel they start getting tight because they're lock washers, or sorry, lock nuts. So let's get our 17. Let's actually confirm that it's a 17. This might not be 17. Oh, I think it's actually 18 or 19. Okay, so we'll try 18 first. Yeah, 18 it is. And so the torque spec that I looked up says mostly somewhere between 35 and 40 foot-pounds, which isn't a whole ton, but enough. making sure it's not spinning inside yet. And it's not yet. It seems to be tightening up just fine. Just starting to get tight or snug. So I'm gonna tighten up the other one for a bit first. I don't know if you can see that, so I'll try to get my arm out of the way. Okay, I can see the inside spinning now. So that means I gotta get my wrench on it. And as luck would have it, I do not have a ratcheting 18mm. Actually, what I do have though is I have a stubby ratcheting 18mm. So, see how this goes. Basically, the point is, let's see if it's gonna fit. So now this might not be. This is just a stubby, so this is not gonna be the one I can use to torque it up. But on the bottom, at least I'll be able to use it to tighten this up a bit more, because the inside is spinning. So the bolt is spinning at this point. So I'm just trying to get this in here, the hex, so I can hold it in place while I keep tightening it up. It's a bit tiring with a little stubby ratcheting wrench, but I'll switch to a regular 18mm wrench shortly. Okay, it's snug. So now I'll switch to an 18mm wrench, tighten it up to what should be around 35 or 40 foot-pounds. I'm quite sure I've mentioned on my channel before that I'm not left-handed, which is just why I'm saying this is a little more challenging. That's as tight as I'm going to get with my left hand and this wrench, so now I'll just turn it at the top. Same concept. Just hold that inside bolt steady with that hex and then tighten her down. Alright, that's as tight as she's gonna get. For me anyway. And we're done. So now we're gonna put the tire back on, take it for a drive. Hopefully that little clunking noise is gone. And I hope this video was helpful, everybody. If it was, let me know by giving me the thumbs up. Drop a comment if you find an easier way to do this. Obviously I had to show you all sorts of stuff, so trying to hold it with a hex while you loosen it up, stripping that out, using penetrant fluid, cutting bolts, using a combination of ratcheting tie straps with a pry bar and locking pliers, as well as a breaker bar or a wrench extender and a wrench on the other end, trying to loosen it up. So getting that all done and using all those different tactics in this DIY video is sometimes just what happens when you work on old and rusted parts. Just a reminder, if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel. Thank you. You'll be notified of the most recent DIY and tool review videos. So thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great week.